Our next unit is on pen and ink. Pen and ink is a drawing medium. So we have several different kinds. We're going to be using a pen similar to this. The black pen is in your packet from first semester. And pen and ink is a kind of drawing. Sometimes we have sort of a snapshot of something that's happening in the real world. This pen and ink drawing has a figure, and you'll notice that it has light spaces, dark values, medium values, and lots of texture. So when we work with pen and ink, one of the very first things we have to work with and practice is how to show value and texture in our drawings. If you pick up your packet in the next few days, you will find several things in your packet. One is a worksheet like this, and one is a pen and ink sheet that has different sample textures and values down here, and other sample textures and patterns with pen and ink and ways of making value on the back. If you don't pick up your packet, then hopefully you all have a sheet of printer paper left from last semester or have a piece of printer paper. You'll notice our handout has a place for our name, date, and period. So if I'm making my own worksheet, then I'm going to put those items at the top. And let's go ahead and do that now. So we'll do our name, first and last. And you'll notice I'm using pencil. So sometimes when we start out in pen and ink, the best thing is to use pencil. And let's see, today is the 10th, so tomorrow's going to be the 11th. So let's put that on there, and don't forget to put your period, okay? So here I have the circles drawn for me. But if you don't have your packet, you'll notice I have a variety of lids here. I can use this or some other object to make my circles. This one is too big. This one is too big. So these two that are from a beverage container are very good. Now you'll notice that the circles are kind of in a line, so we're doing 10 textures. So we have 3, 6, 9, and 1 left over. You may make those in a different pattern if you wish. So if I wanted to think about making a design, and you'll notice I'm not using pen now, I'm using pencil. So the first thing is to draw my shapes. And so I would need 10. And maybe I want to do 3 on the first row. And it will work better if they're not, the circles or shapes you draw are not touching each other, because we will be labeling our shapes. Okay, so now I have 5, so then I'll do 3. So if I wanted to make my shapes in a diamond pattern, I could do that. If I wanted to turn my paper horizontally and do 2 rows of 5, I could do that. And it should be neat. Okay, so there I have my 10 shapes. All right, I'm going to use this one today. And when I look at, I want to start with the 10 pen and ink or 12 pen and ink shapes or value sections here. Almost all of these are made up of some kind of straight line. So I have vertical lines, horizontal lines, and diagonal lines. So I will choose one. If I choose the vertical lines, then everything is going to be vertical. If I choose horizontal lines, it's going to be horizontal. So I'm looking for line direction. The second thing is, if I notice that on square number 5, it's darker in the upper corner and then goes lighter and darker in the bottom corner, then I'm going to try to copy that pattern on my drawing. So number 1 is here, so I'm going to say short, parallel, vertical lines. And I really think it's a great idea to do it in pencil first. In pen and ink, I'm spacing out my lines. So the closer together I make the lines, the darker the value. On shape number 1, it starts out kind of medium and gets lighter. So how do I make the value lighter? By letting more space be between the lines and also having shorter lines. And then the value changes. The value changes and gets darker. So that means I'm going to start putting the lines closer together. And have less white space between them, so that on my paper the values change. Now when I come back to check the value, this is a little bit too much white space, so I might have to go back and add a few lines. My next step is to come back and ink. And it really will work best if you don't use a ruler, if you freehand it. But if I'm using ink, even if I'm using a Sharpie pen, the ink is fresh for a while, so I want to work away from where I'm inking so that the ink does not smudge. And after the ink is all dry, so after I have finished all 10 shapes and patterns, I'm going to come back and erase the pencil lines so that just my ink lines are left. Okay, all right, so let's pick another one. So for number 2, I'm going to do the diagonal pattern. On the diagonal pattern, the lines are going a different direction. So the easiest way is maybe to turn my paper. You have to see what feels most comfortable for you. Okay, so let's see. I want to go this way. I'm going to work right to left. So I'm going to start, the corner is darker. Let's see. Is that better? Okay, so I'm going to start up here in this corner. So I'm working far away. The values, the lines are pretty close together. As I move towards the center of the shape, they move further apart. And once I get a little bit past center, they start moving closer together. So the value becomes darker. Basically, the lines are pretty parallel. They don't touch. And you'll notice that sometimes I've started from the top, it feels awkward, so I like to start from the bottom or the left side and work to the right side. And then I would go ahead and ink that. But before I move on, I might forget what pattern I've chosen. So it's diagonal parallel lines. Okay, all right, now let's pick one that's a little different. Number 12 is wood grain. Okay, so now I'm trying to simulate wood grain. So I want to think about something organic and natural. I can look at the tabletop around me. You'll notice the lines are darker and lighter, longer and shorter. Maybe you have a tabletop or a bookcase, something at home, a door frame that you can look at. But I do, since I'm using my sheet, I do want to use the pattern here of the wood grain on the sheet as my inspiration. Okay, and this is wood grain. I think on your technique page it just says grain. I don't know what happened to the wood, but it is wood grain, so let's put wood grain there. Okay, we're going to turn over and take a look at some of the textures on the back. So you'll notice we have two textures that say hatching. I want you to try both of those. One is sort of like a brickwork, so it's made up of groups of parallel lines, and one is straight lines. So let's try this one first. It would look something like this. It's made up of 3 or 4 parallel lines, and then a patch or a group of parallel lines going the different direction. And then mostly the lines are horizontal, vertical, and I have a space here, so these would go that direction. Sometimes it's easy to get lost in where you're going. So basically, again, I've started kind of on the upper corner, and no horizontal touches a horizontal and no vertical touches a vertical. And the spaces should be as kind of uniform. Here I've got a little space left, so I might add a bit of a short line there. This one needs to be vertical. This one needs to be going the opposite direction. So when we're finished, we come back and fill in our edges if they're uneven, okay? You can leave a little space between them, or here in the example on our texture page, the lines actually touch. So if I want them to touch, I can just extend them a little bit. Okay, so this is hatching. And right next to it, I want you to do the other kind of hatching. So when we're doing this kind of hatching, we want to make our strokes as straight as possible. And they are parallel. They're not touching each other, so they're as uniform as possible. Now, if you find it hard to do this by freehand, I'm not using a ruler. You may go ahead and use a ruler to draw the pencil part. but when we're using pen and ink, the ink will smudge if we use the ruler. So it's really best to do it freehand. Okay, so this was also hatching. So we kind of have a comparison with these two hatching. Okay, all right, how do we change the value? You can see we have three tones that are similar to the hat. Two are similar to this hatching, but they have light areas. So on the graded tone, the lightest value is on the right side. On the left, this one, the broken hatching, it looks a little bit like a birch bark. Okay, particularly if I turn the page, you can see how it looks kind of like birch bark on the birch tree. So remember that how we control the value is by where we break the line and where we leave the white space. Okay, so I think you can do this one fine. So you're going to choose one of these. Let's try the graded tone. I want it lighter at the top and darker at the bottom. This one's going to be a graded tone. So let's go very light at the top, lots of space between, short strokes. And then as I move towards center, I'm going to have a few more lines. And the lines are also going to be closer together. And what I want to watch out for is that my breaks between the lines, they're not lining up all in the same place. You'll notice they're staggered. Here's a break, so it kind of zigzags through the pattern. And as I move towards the bottom of the page, the breaks get fewer and fewer, and the lines get closer together, which is what makes the value get darker. Okay. Cross hatching, I want to show you. This one is cross hatching, which is kind of complicated. Cross hatching means the lines crisscross together. So let's do a cross hatching here. And you can make it very dark like this if you want, or you can make it be lighter. Cross hatching is where I take my first set of lines, and since we're filming, I'm going to turn my paper, so then I'm going across in the opposite direction. And then just like in our hatching pattern, my next pattern is maybe going to be vertical, and then my hatching pattern would be horizontal. Now when I'm hatching using this kind of pattern, I do not have to line up each block or set or group of lines with one. So here I don't have to do another vertical or horizontal, but I do have to kind of pay attention to those open spaces. And vary my marks so that I am using horizontal, vertical, diagonal strokes. In blocks. And then if I have space left over, I might vary the pattern a little bit. or vary the direction of the line, but I'm going to fill the entire circle and all the spaces that I have left. Okay, so I have blocks of pattern. Okay.
Do a sloppy one.
Okay. All right, now this is going to be a sloppy hatching. And this is a bad example of graded tone. Why is it a bad example? A couple things. First, it's sloppy, it goes outside the circle. Second, the value doesn't change. And thirdly, the lines are all kind of scattered. Okay? So when you're doing your pen and ink, even if you're working with pencil, it's important to focus on what you're doing. Okay? While we're on the back side, one of the techniques here in this bottom corner is stipple. And there is also an example of stippling on this side. Okay? So again, I'm going to show you a bad example of stipple here, and then a good example on the other side. Done. Okay, that's a bad example of stipple and a bad example of graded tone. A good example of stipple would be, if I look at the example, it's darker in this corner. So remember, when I'm using pen and ink, the more dots, I don't have to bang my pen or bang my pencil into the tabletop or onto the piece of paper. The more the dots, the darker the value. So the closer together, the darker the value. And the more spread out the dots, and they're in a random pattern. I don't want you to draw a tree or a flower. So we're trying to show, like the pattern here, it's not an object. And then if I want my darker to be in this upper left corner, I'm going to put in more dots. Okay, so that's the pencil. Now the same is true when I'm adding the pen. I'm making a little dot or a little circle with the pen. And when the ink is dry, I'll erase the pencil, so if they don't line up exactly on the pencil marks you made, it's fine. If you feel comfortable, you do not need to use pencil once you've started, but it's always a good idea to start with pencil so that you're sure that you are going off to a good start. Okay? And then as I work my way across, maybe I'm going to decide that this isn't dark enough. So then I would come back and add more dots just by touching the pen to the paper or by making a little mark. Okay? So for the other techniques, you choose contour lines, loops, wavy lines, V's. You can choose anything off these 12, but you're only going to use a pattern once. Or off the back, you can choose anything here. I do not want you to do grass or background trees or foreground trees. Okay, so we're not drawing objects, we're just drawing textures. And this is our first pen and ink assignment. In your packet, you're going to have a 2020 that is horizontal and a 2020 that's vertical. And this will be our assignment number 2. we're going to lay a blank sheet of paper on top, and if you put it in a window, it will trace very well. I see here I missed a line. Okay, so here is my horizontal composition, and you choose horizontal or vertical, and we'll talk about that more next time. Okay, so I will want you to pick up your packets this week if you can. They'll be available from Tuesday on, and I will send you an email about how to pick those up from the parking lot at North Campus or in the library.